Thank you, Andre. And yeah, I guess that 3 times in Timisoara is a typical JavaScript rounding error. If we don't count the 1 year I spent here as a student, then yeah, it's almost accurate. So yeah, thank you for having me. And before I introduce myself, first, let's celebrate you. Congrats, like 100 meetups is a huge deal. Like 12 years and having the community together and still gathering and still doing after COVID, it's a big deal. I really, really appreciate it as a meetup organizer myself. So yeah, give a round of applause to yourselves, because it is a big deal. Yeah, congrats. So my name is Benedek, Ben short. I'm currently working at a Hungarian startup called Sion. And before I worked at companies like Shopify and LastPass and a bunch of others. I'm at the age where the number of companies I worked at kind of dates me. So I'm kind of omitting the other ones. But yeah, these were the last 3. Yeah, and one thing about me is that I really, really love tea. So I have to put something about tea in every talk. And one aspect of tea I really like is that it's kind of timeless. So it has a really big history. It has a very interesting contemporary presence. And it's very interesting to see where it goes, like what's the future of it. And 2 years ago, I randomly realized that React is 10 years old. And that kind of like hit me, like, wow, 10 years old, really? And that kind of led me down the path of thinking about how this whole front-end ecosystem went from 15 years ago. There wasn't even like a position called front-end developer, and what we have today, and where is it going? Like it's a very interesting thing to think about. And when Andre asked me if I could give a talk here, I thought it was a really good match, because the 100th edition is also something like that, where you get the chance to look back, like what happened, take account what's happening right now, and maybe think about where this is leading us, like what's the future. So please join me in this talk, where it's going to be very personal. So it's going to be full of very spicy opinions, hot takes. But my goal here is not to like give out facts, especially in the age of AI, what is even a fact. But it's more about to start a conversation. Like I think there are a lot of interesting topics about our past, the present, and the future of our front end. So I'd be very, very happy if this would start a few conversations here or afterwards. I'm very much in the camp of strong opinions held loosely. So I would be really happy if some of you would come to me and like prove me wrong afterwards in Romanian or English or Hungarian, doesn't matter. So yeah, let's do that. But just take it into consideration that if you see something that's holy shit, that's not, I don't agree with that, that was the purpose. OK, so let's start with the past. So I'm not going back to Brandon Eich and how JavaScript and CSS was invented and stuff like that. But there was a pretty long time when front-end development was just this. Just these few things. You were writing HTML, sprinkle some CSS, and some nice GIFs to make it funkier, and then add JS, which was basically jQuery. Like everybody would jQuery. And then in a very, very short span of time, it blew up to this. Like ES5 appeared. A bunch of new tools appeared. Babel was like a very big thing because it made it much easier to write like polyfills and stuff for the web. New tools like Bower and NPM made it much easier to share your code. That resulted in a boom of like open source, because it was much easier to use others' code, and you were motivated to write it because a bunch of people will use it. How we build the end product, like the ending, the JS that's end up in the client's browser, also became much more complex, but much more easier with Gulp and Grunt. And then the frameworks came, and then in the meanwhile, CSS was also doing these very interesting things with CSS preprocessors. I'm just out of curiosity, has anyone here used Compass? A few people. Love it. OK. Lessons S? OK. Cool. I feel much younger now, thank you. And then HTML5 was also a pretty big deal. I'm not sure if you remember, but there was a time when a bunch of websites would put the HTML5 logo in front, because it showed that we're modern, we are the cool kids. But it was actually really important. It brought so many new features, so many new capabilities. So it was a time full of a lot of changes, and I loved it. Like, I started out as a Java developer, and during this time was the point when I saw that, oh my God, what's going on in the front-end world is very cool, it's very interesting, I want to be part of it. That's how I became a front-end developer. So I'm really emotionally tied to this period when everything was changing, something new was happening every week. It was very interesting to be part of it. And yeah, when flowers blossom, the bees will come. With the new technologies and the new possibilities, a bunch of people also, like me, became front-end engineers. The thing that didn't really exist before became like a big industry and a big community. So let's take a slightly more objective view at what was going on. So let's start with the positives first. Innovation became constant. So in this period, there was something new every week, a new framework, a new library, a new idea. And yeah, you have to add a little asterisk there to innovation, because most of these things weren't really innovation. We were just like reusing old ideas from backend development, from game development and stuff. But the point is that it was new to this ecosystem. It wasn't done before with JavaScript. It wasn't done on client side before. And this was a big deal. And then there were new browser capabilities every day. So it wasn't just the community. It was also the vendors. Like they really felt that this is a moment to put a lot of effort and a lot of money into this. Like the big vendors were putting out new features very, very frequently. And then because lots of people started working on this, there was lots of ideas that needed expressing, and then the open source boomed. Yeah, NPM was a very big factor in this. It became really easy to share your code and include it in your own project. But it was also like a personal thing. A lot of people being very motivated to add to what the community has. And yeah, communities were born. Like this community was born in 2013, if I'm right. Yeah, this is the time when these things appeared. 2013 is the year when React was born also. So it's that period when this a lot of changes, a lot of energy kind of translated into these things that still exist. But of course, there were kind of things that, looking back, weren't quite ideal. One of the big things would be that this was breakneck speed. Like things were evolving very fast, and it's very easy to make bad decisions at breakneck speeds. And there are some decisions that are still with us that back then didn't feel as bad, but nowadays it would be nice to change, but it's not as easy anymore. I mentioned NPM, that would be one. Like the whole idea of let's share very tiny packages because it makes us faster made sense in that time when things were moving very fast. Nowadays, not so much. In an arms race, when you're like developing something new and you want to be the next big thing very fast, UX and developer experience, DX, are kind of secondary. Like when the frameworks came out, or somebody in their bedroom was coding the new framework that's going to change everything, they wanted to make an impact, but these things kind of like, okay, we fix those later. And we are software engineers. We know how we'll fix that later works. So yeah, a lot of problems in UX and DX are still with us. Another problem is that constant change is anything but inclusive. Back then, I was 20-something with a lot of time to spare. It was fun to be part of this wild ride. If the same thing happened today, I'm not sure if I had the energy or the time to keep up. And I'm sure that there are a lot of people who were interested in this, but just like couldn't really keep up because it's hard. It's hard to do that. And also, these changes, these constant changes, constantly keeping up, kind of resulted in something that even got the name front-end fatigue, when you were just really, really bored or like really lost of energy on keeping up with all the changes. And okay, this is not the coolest because something else came. It takes a lot of energy, and sometimes that was hard. And bad memes. This is a really big problem of mine. Like even today, I see people joking that, yeah, front-end developers rewrite their code in a new framework every week, when React has been here for 12 years, and most of the code in the world is written in React, but same goes for Angular too also. So yeah, these are not real anymore, and I'm not going to even start with centering a div jokes. Please, let's get over that. Okay. So back then, it felt that we solved everything, or at least made it possible to solve everything. Like I clearly remember when I was first looking at how Babel worked, like, wow, like all the problems we had with JavaScript are going to be solved like that. And it was like very optimistic. Let's talk now about the recent past. So here's, among the hot takes, here's an even hotter take. I think that by the end of 2017, progress basically stopped. Or if it hasn't stopped, it just plateaued or slowed down to a very slow extent compared to this period that I talked about before. Why? Why do I feel that? And I had this really strong feeling, but I couldn't really like put my finger on like why. So I wanted to dig deeper, and I just started looking at the technologies being developed, like or the ones that were promised, and like what's going on. So I think there are a bunch of categories, and the resulting situation. So the different categories result in this situation that I just described. So first, there are the eternal promises. There are projects that were very interesting, but they keep being just a promise and not an actual thing, like Project Houdini. Does anybody even know what's going on there? But it was so cool at some point, but no. Tail optimization is basically a meme at this point. I'm not even sure if anybody's working on it, but I remember all the talks where we said that, yeah, it's going to change everything. We're going to write super functional JavaScript. Yeah, it's just an eternal promise. There are things that never really got completed. So I'm not sure how many of you work with WebRTC. Yeah, the developer experience is crazy bad, but it works and it powers half of the web, like especially during COVID, like every second thing that you would use had WebRTC behind it. It's a pain. It never really got completed, but it works, so who cares? Same with subtle crypto. Okay, WebRTC is a big problem. Subtle crypto is not a big problem, but it's a big problem for me personally because it just bugs me that something so important like actually correct cryptography was made in such a bad way that the API is just so bad. It's clear that the people who designed it aren't really like using JavaScript APIs on the daily basis. But yeah, this is a different topic. There are things that are kind of just done. Basically, there's no reason to innovate when you're kind of done. The JavaScript language itself, okay, I'm aware that new things are coming in, but most of it is just either syntactic sugar or keeping up with TypeScript, which is, again, TypeScript itself is kind of done. Like the big deals, the really big game changer features are already there. Like I'm sure a few of you know like what are the big JavaScript and TypeScript features coming, but most of us I don't think need to know. Back then we were like, oh my God, ES6 is coming, and everybody knew what was coming, and we were waiting like when you saw a trailer for a movie and you were like putting it in your calendar that it's coming out in a year. It felt like that. Nowadays it's more like, who really cares? Web components is like that. Like it's kind of feels finished, but Martin will talk more about that. PVAs, like again, it was a big craze. It's going to beat mobile applications. Like the whole world will be PVAs. Yeah, the technology behind it is done, and kind of like the market priced it in a way that it exists, but not as important as we thought it would be. The CSS grid is also like that. It's a very nice piece of technology, but it's so good that it solved so many problems that it doesn't need extra things. It doesn't need a breakneck speed of change. It's there and it works. There are some things that just fizzled. Like they happen, but they are not as big as we expected them to be. Like WebAssembly is one of those. I gave talks on WebAssembly and how it's going to change things. It's good for a few niche use cases for some big companies, but for most of the front-end developers, it's a don't really care thing. React suspense, oh my God. Like this was promised to be the big thing for a glorified spinner. It's basically that. It's like a glorified way of putting a spinner on the page. But for years we were listening to talks like, wow, it's going to change everything. And then there are things where we just stagnate. There's room for improvement, but for various reasons we don't really see that improvement happening. And one of those would be HTML elements. I know that the idea was that the community will build new elements with web components, and that will be like platform agnostic and stuff like that, but there are still some things that we would need that everybody uses, every second page uses, that we don't have. But there's no effort there anymore from the vendors. Testing. I know that there was Cypress, and then nowadays Playwright is the thing, but still that end-to-end testing and to be able to tell if the UI is a correct UI and to test it automatically, it's still a big problem and has been for the last 15 years, and there's still no real movement there. Cross-platform, it works. I worked quite long on a React Native project. It has its pains, but it kind of works. And there are some, again, some limitations there, but the point is that it's not going to change the world. Everybody knows like what are the trade-offs, and yeah, it's there. CSS and Tailwind, it's also like, it was kind of funny when Tailwind came in, and I was like, we saw this before. Like this kind of brings back old times. So again, like old ideas recycled, and I'm glad it helps some people, but at the end of the day, there's no big changes in how we write CSS. It's not like the change from pure CSS to Sass, for example. That was a big change. It doesn't really happen anymore. And I put there GraphQL, but it should be more like so pressed GraphQL. It's like front-end applications query the backend and try to get data. And I don't feel that this is a solved problem at all. It still hurts whatever method you use, and there's still no new ideas in this field. Of course, I could go on. These are just the things that I have a problem with. But in general, I have this feeling that it's not, there's no forward momentum anymore. Like there are some incremental changes, some syntactic sugar here and there, some fixing a few holes here and there, but that big change has kind of stopped. And one of the reasons is that the fast pace resulted in tech debt. Just like in a small project, here in a big scale, we have tech debt, and that's one of the reasons that results in slower progress. And the tech debt, if you ask me, is in two main bases: on developer experience side and UX side. And I think a very good poster child of what I mean by this on the DX side would be, and I'm skipping on the name because I hate it so much that I just deleted it from my mind, but how we used to like build Webpack. Yeah, Webpack. So Webpack was so incredibly bad, like trying to understand the complex Webpack config was basically impossible, and we didn't even have AI back then. But we kind of put up with it because it was so good at the end result that, okay, this is a typical situation where bad DX is kind of like supported because the end result is okay. And then there's the UX part where I could, I think talking about the UX is a very good segue to the next part, which is, if we talk about the recent past, we have to talk about the great debate, which is first, not really a debate. It's pretty one-sided, and it's not great at all. It's bad. It's terrible. What I'm talking about is the debate between folks saying that React and SPAs in general, but for some reason it's always React. It's never Angular. It's always React. Is the root of all evil. Never use React. It's so bad. It's because of that people are dying somewhere. So it is very strong feeling against React. And then the React community giving its own answer to this. So this debate has been with us for a long time, and I think it's worth talking about a bit, because although it sounds like this kind of non-productive thing, I think there has some interesting aspects. So what are the people who are saying that React is bad have, of course, a bunch of very valid points. They say that too much bloat gets shipped, too much code ends up on the computer of the user, which is not used or not used optimally. There's unfair load on client devices because of this. And yeah, developers are having a very smooth experience on their MacBooks, but somebody with an older Android phone doesn't have the same. There's terrible accessibility. Of course, I think this is quite very, very known and not news for anybody, that when you use a bunch of magic tools, all the underlying things get lost and often results in terrible accessibility. There's an over-engineering tech bro culture where you use, for even like a very simple landing page, React and a bunch of other frameworks and technologies that don't shine there, but you think that you have to use them. Then there's this feeling in general where a bunch of people say that SPAs are almost never the answer. This is also something that we're kind of bringing from those old times when SPAs were like innovation and kind of stuck with us. And then this is kind of the extreme end of the argument, but some people are saying that basically good developer experience is bad because that means that the developers focus on themselves and not the users, which is an interesting argument to make, but I wanted to present it here because it's part of the package, kind of. So if I try to distill this whole argument, I think what they're trying to say is that engineers sold out on UX, basically sacrificed UX for their own enjoyment, for a good developer experience. And so now the question is, what is the React community's answer to this? Well, it's mostly just crickets, because this is not really a debate, actually. One side is like going really against React, and then you go to a React conference, and you would expect talks there telling you that you should always use React. And no, that doesn't really happen. like basically, the React community doesn't really react, no pun intended, to these. They mostly just turn inside and try to, they are aware of these problems. Of course they are aware. And they try to solve it inside their own bubble. And that kind of reminds me of a thing that a BJJ teammate of mine tends to say. He's saying is that if brute force doesn't work, it means that you aren't using enough of it. And it's kind of similar sometimes with React, because it feels that for the React community, if there's too much React, it means that it needs a bit more. Like most of the React solutions to these problems are adding more React features, and I keep repeating React, but to be honest, on one hand, because I don't keep up with Angular as much as I should, and second, because most of these debates are centered around it. But yeah, this is what happens. So that's why I said there's not even a debate. And that kind of brings us back to the old days of the community, when these debates, sometimes they were like flame wars between frameworks, but at least there was like a really direct conversation. I feel that even that is missing nowadays. It gets weird. And the funny thing is that if you go far enough, it's just like two sides of the same coin. Because React is using engineering to make the UX better, because they feel that the UX is the tech that they want to solve. And then the SSG, SSR solutions, which are the end results of those arguments that I mentioned before, are using engineering to make the bad DX of developing simple HTML applications results. Because if you want to follow that advice, don't ship too much junk, blah, 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 you have bad developer experience. You could write plain HTML and CSS. The problem is it will hurt. That's why we have React and all these tools. So, but if you don't want to use those tools, you have to use other tools. So you end up in this SSG, SSR ecosystem, which is, again, a huge business. And I'm absolutely not surprised that it's so big, because it's very easy to monetize. So although it seems to be a debate here, I think if we go far enough, it just shows that, yeah, the problem right now, or one of the problems, especially in the recent past with front-end development, was that we have this tech debt in developer experience and user experience. Simply a plain HTML site is the fastest, loads the fastest, works the fastest, and reaching that with complex JavaScript code is really hard. So basically, in the recent past, it's felt that we solved everything, or at least the most common pain points. It felt to me up until nowadays that we're really close. There are some things missing, but we're really, really close. And there's this old meme. I think it was around this time when I felt that this is absolutely not funny anymore. It's not true anymore, because just the whole ecosystem became so mature that this didn't even make sense. OK, let's talk about the present. There's so much that could be said about a current state of something, and I'm going to omit a bunch of things. So again, I'm coming back to the being very personal here, but a few things that I think are clear about where we are now is like, basically HTML and CSS are considered nowadays low level. What I mean by this is that I realized in my previous job that I spent half a year without writing any. Just because I had a very good design system, most of the tasks weren't about building new experiences, but extending existing ones. I didn't have to move outside of it. Basically, I was living one abstraction layer above. Then I talked to other people, and yeah, I had a colleague who told me that I've been writing React Native code for a year. I have no idea how styling works. They didn't need to, because the design system took it over. And in general, there's this feeling where you know that these are, so we're not as far removed from these things as from assembly, for example, but they start to become just basically the low-level thing that we put abstractions on top of. The other thing that is very strong, I think, is cross-platform is here to stay. So I mentioned that it kind of works, but it was in this limbo where we weren't sure. There was a big article by Airbnb why they switched off from React Native, and then they quietly switched back, by the way. And nowadays, a bunch of big companies are betting on React Native because with all the pain, it's just solving what it was meant to solve at the first place. Not a user problem, not a developer problem, but a management problem of, OK, how do you work on multiple things with multiple teams in a way that makes sense and is cheap? So yeah, I'm pretty sure that cross-platform is here to stay. And then React has won, basically. Like, again, I'm not sure how many of you are writing Angular. I'm not saying that Vue is bad. No, Vue is great. It has a lot of good ideas. But if you look at the latest versions of Vue, it's basically becoming a version of React. It's like coming closer and closer and closer. Svelte is nice, but I'm not sure why it has never got the traction that it might have gotten if it appeared a few years earlier. But in general, if you look at, I don't know, VCs or people who see this whole ecosystem from far away, from them, frontend is React, basically. There's no debate. And I think this is a very important observation to make today, because if you look back at how fragmented the framework space was, yeah, compared to that, what we have today is basically React and some other things. And then the big thing, SSG and SSR are basically solved. So I think it's very cool to look back, like how fast this happened. Like just a few years back, these things were ideas that your old Java framework would do, and then in a few years with Vercel and Next and Remix and all these technologies coming in, Astro and all these good ideas, Gatsby, it basically resulted in something where we have so much complexity in this space and so many good solutions to real valid problems. And yeah, it has become a huge business also. So I think if we are talking about our current state, it's important to realize that so things aren't changing as fast as they used to, but the people are still here, the very smart people who did that change. What are they working on? Where most of the effort goes into very complex areas. So yeah, we have to realize that the changes do happen. It's just not super visible and maybe not as democratic. It doesn't really affect everyone in the same way. And basically, complexity is not proportional to the area of impact, meaning that if something is very, very complex and the very complex problem is solved, it doesn't mean that it helps everybody. And I think that's happening today in most of the areas. So there's a complexity boom. The complexity has been through the roof in many, many, many areas. For example, the framework have become mature. A very, very easy way to explain this is that back in 2016, I was doing teaching and I was talking to companies, and then they would ask me, like, how long is a React intro? And I would say like 1.5 days, 2. If they ask the same question now, it would be a week or more. just because the framework itself and everything around it has become much, much, much more complex. The same with Angular, like with Eric's and all the magic and signals and everything that you need to be able to basically understand the contemporary code base is just more complex. It's deeper. Also, performance is the topic like that. So there are a lot of work going in to how we can have really good JavaScript performance, both on the front and the back end. And the thing with this is that although we appreciate it, most of us work on products where that depth is not needed. So I remember watching a very, very interesting talk about font rendering speed and how you can optimize that. And I was like, how many people are affected by this? Like, what are the web pages that are slowed down by font rendering and not something else? So we are very, very deep in this, and it's very interesting. At the same time, it doesn't affect us all at the same way. The whole back-end, front-end blur with like server-side rendered components, and you write code, but it's actually renders on the back-end and becomes front-end code. So this whole thing kind of started blurring. Lambdas also go in here. And again, it's much, much, much deeper than it used to be. DevOps.js, like nowadays, I said Webpack was complicated. What's happening now is complicated. Like for a product to have a really complicated pipeline where some of the things go into Lambda, some of the things are rendered on the server, some of the things are packed based on routes. It's very, very complex. And I actually got like on LinkedIn messages where they were looking for a DevOps.js engineer. So that already exists. Security is always there. I have to say this because I would feel bad if I didn't mention security. Security is always there, and it's here to stay. And then design systems itself. Like, it's so cool to see how strong design systems are nowadays. And you have to go back and look at the very first talks about it. And it's funny to see how simple those were and how strong the new contemporary design systems are. So also a lot of work went into this area. And one of the kind of things that follows from this is that it has never been harder to enter this field as a junior. When we had that big boom, okay, it became less trivial to be a front-end engineer, but it became a field. Before that, it was web developer, and you had to know back-end too. And the overall depth wasn't as bad. Nowadays, it's much worse. So you have to know HTML, but of course, it's much, much wider and deeper. You have to know CSS, but with all the CSS in JS stuff, or at least some of those. You have to know JS, which actually is TS, because nowadays nobody's writing plain JS anymore. You have to know React, which is, again, much deeper than it used to be. You have to know Next.js, or at least have some idea about it. And then you have to know Lambdas, and I could continue this list for a long time. So it's much, much harder to be a competent junior front-end developer now than it used to be. And I think the market kind of also shows this. And the other big factor that we can't forget that makes our juniors' lives harder is, of course, AI. With all the weird expectations that are put on by companies and how you can actually use it, and it's just a mess. So I'm really feeling sorry for all the juniors coming into this field nowadays. And in a talk where we talk about where we are, I think we have to really stop for a second and talk about this. Okay, so basically today it feels that we solved everything, but at what cost? At the cost of complexity. Cool. I do see the glass as half full, though. There are a lot of cool things that happened recently. The frameworks are actually mature, and now not in parentheses. It's actually cool to see that these are in a very good shape. There are stylable selects. Finally, it only took 1.5 decades, but we can style selects properly now. We have CSS nesting, again, something that we've been using in SAS and stuff for a long time. We have position anchoring, we have container queries, we have the has. So we have a lot of things that we were waiting for a long time and appeared in the very recent times. So that's cool. Okay, let's talk about the future. I asked the AI, or ChatGPT, if it's possible to do a talk in 2015 about the future of front-end development without mentioning AI. And ChatGPT said that it would feel incomplete and maybe even outdated. It also said that your audience will probably bring it up in the QA anyways. So here I am, I have to talk about I have to bring up AI in the future of front-end development. So I have 5 axioms, basically 5 things that I think are true, and I'm going to base a bunch of things on these. Bigger code bases are harder to maintain. I don't think we have a disagreement there. AI-aided development is more productive on the task level. So one task done without, the same task done with AI is going to be more productive. More data means better performing AI. The developer experience of framework is less important when used with AI because the AI kind of bridges those problems. You hate the boilerplate code, you're not going to write it by your hand. And the AI strong suit is width, not depth. So it's very good because it can touch many, many things, but it doesn't really have a deep knowledge in them. OK, so let's first. Bigger code bases are harder to maintain, and AI-aided development is more productive. For me, from these results, that at a certain point, it will be possible to get by without AI. Because as the code base grows, it will be harder and harder to maintain, but AI development is more productive, so the code base grows faster. So we're going to reach a point where we have the same productivity as we have today without AI, just with AI. And at that point, you can get rid of it. So the stickiness is pretty good if you're a product owner, but I think it's a very important thing to consider today because it's definitely going to happen. The entropy is always there in code bases, so we can't just forget about it. OK, the second thing. The DXOR framework is less important, and more data means better performing AI. These 3 things together, for me, result that winner takes it all. So if you're big today, it means that you're going to become even bigger because more code is generated in the current frameworks. So it means that for somebody new, it's really, really hard to disrupt the status quo. I could come up with the coolest framework today, but because the AI doesn't really have enough data to be very efficient in it, it's probably not going to succeed. And that means, combined with React has one, that we're probably going to have React along for quite a long time. I'm not sure if that's a good news or bad news for you, but let's keep that. Yeah, to the DX thing, if we add that AI strong suit is width and not depth, we result that everybody has to be a full stack developer. Because with the usage of AI, it's expected of you to have width. And that means that you have to be able to touch both backend and frontend and multiple things. At the same time, because the AI is not really good at deep things, it means that deep knowledge is still very, very, very important and very valuable because you can have, thanks to the AI, a bunch of people who can implement a very simple CRUD operation from the database to the CSS, but not that many who can solve a very deep rendering problem or accessibility problem or something. And then what this means for you as an individual who plans their career around front-end. Well, the fact that at a certain point it will be impossible to get by without AI, it means that coding with the help of AI is a skill that you should work on. So today, I'm not really afraid of AI taking my job. I'm afraid of somebody who's really, really good at using AI taking my job. Because it's just so much, they have so much better performance. The whole winner takes it all React wins kind of deal means to me that it might not be the best time to live your hipster years. So I don't think this is the time to jump on the ship that, yeah, I'm going to do only code in Svelte or something like that, because career-wise, it might not make as much sense. Yeah, the thing with full stack development, for me, means that boarding the full stack ship doesn't mean that I can be a front-end expert. So I think nowadays the job descriptions are going to become even more obfuscated and have even less sense. But at the root of it, for me, it means that companies will need somebody who can touch everything, but can solve complex problems on the front end. And for me, who was a front-end developer for a very long time, this seems like a very natural expansion of my career. If we're talking about the future and things that will be with us for a long time, we can't really go by NPM. Like I said, NPM is a huge tech debt that's with us. And with all its problems, the biggest one these last few weeks was security. We had like 3, 4 huge NPM breaches with a lot of very serious security issues. This stays with us. And yeah, security in general is a field that here is to stay. Like, I think if you want like a very secure job in IT, nowadays you have to be in AI or security, because these are the 2 things that will be with us for a very long time. And this kind of just proves it. And yeah, I know that these last few thoughts weren't really happy, but at the same time, I do see the future of our industry and front-end development as something bright, something positive. Because at the end of the day, it has never been easier to deliver high-quality user experiences. Like nowadays, if you want to deliver a very cool website, when was the last time you said website? It's so easy. It's so easy to do that, and we as users are so used to having these really pleasant experiences shown to us. And I think that's just a positive thing. And I do feel that we will solve everything. Yeah, eventually. It's never perfect, and we living in the eastern part of Europe, it never be perfect. But at the same time, I do feel this thing that we're getting there. We're so much closer. And the number one reason why I feel that is that the future is in great hands. It's in the hands of people. It's in the hands of communities that I really enjoyed being part of, and I hope to be part of for a very long time. And communities like tim.js that has been together for a long time, and you had the chance to share your ideas, get help, form connections, maybe get a new opportunity through. I think these connections and this human aspect is the one that makes me feel very positive about front-end development and future in general. So thank you very much. And again, here's to the next 100 tim.js meetups.